Coonskin. Among the works of animation pioneer Ralph Bakshi, Coonskin is one that doesn't get as much recognition as others. It's not the kind that you see gathering a cult following like Wizards or Cool World, and it's not the kind that is noted to have a historical significance in cinema like Fritz the Cat or Heavy Traffic. However, if there is one thing that makes this film stand out from the rest of Bakshi's filmography, is that this is Ralph's most controversial movie. I'll talk more about this later in the review, but this is one that caused the most outrage during its release that involved protests and smoke bombs, and unfortunately, it's also one that haunted Bakshi's career that set him back a few times. I mean, after the big uproar that Bakshi caused, studios at the time had been hesitant to work with him for years in fear that he may cause trouble as much as he did with Coonskin. Then again, one could argue that the movie does have all the ingredients to be a real troublemaking picture. It has shocking imagery, gets very political, it's insanely violent, goes hard on social issues, criticizes America as a country. This is one of the least safe animated features ever created. And you know what? After all these years I've been doing this, I'm not afraid to get into some trouble while talking about a cartoon. So I think this is gonna be a fun review that we're about to get into here. So now that we're joining the three brothers in New York, is it time that we drop the outrage and start giving this movie some credit? Or is this film as corrupted as Harlem's system? Let's find out. The story. Underneath all the gunfights and the stereotypical caricatures, Coonskin is actually a film adaptation of the Uncle Remus stories. Well, a loose adaptation, obviously. The story of Coonskin is about three brothers who move into a corrupted Harlem, where the streets are ruled by a handful of cons and crooks, and one by one, Brother Rabbit finds a way to take them down to free the people and break its inner societal hierarchy. In terms of the plot itself, I'll admit that it is somewhat disjointed, and it's pretty clear that the film's main purpose is not to tell a story. In fact, with the way that it's built, it's almost like an anthology feature, as it continuously hops between the brothers' plot, the live-action scenes where the human versions of Fox and Bear try to get their version of Rabbit out of prison, who are played by their respective voices, and short scenes of random characters as we see them living systematically at the bottom.
Ain't it been good together, says I? Yeah, woman, says Malcolm, but hell, I can't do nothing for you. It's always cold here, and a few scraps to eat at your table ain't as good as what I find in the garbage downtown.
Yes, there is a small connection between all of them, whether it be the similarities of the characters or the subject of Harlem, but they don't feel like they're all working together to tell this one cohesive story, despite that it's kind of the direction that it wants to narratively go with instead of the anthology angle. And with all these plot lines going around, there are even some elements that can feel missing to make this a complete story. I noticed this especially when Brother Rabbit had little to no trouble taking down the big bosses of Harlem. Sure, he gets into a few fights, but he was able to take down his main targets with unnaturally relative ease.
I'm begging you, don't throw me out that window. 'Cause I was born and raised in a garbage can.
Okay, so this may not have the most admirable writing in the traditional movie sense, but if Coonskin doesn't want to primarily tell a story, then what else? Well, this is where Ralph's true talents come in. You see, what I love about Ralph Bakshi is that he is one of the greatest filmmakers who can implement strong social commentary onto their work. And I have to say that out of all his movies, I think Coonskin does it the best. Sure, Ralph did feature that kind of commentary in his other films like Fritz the Cat, Heavy Traffic, or Wizards, but they always seem like there's something holding Bakshi back from expressing his true feelings through his art, as if it was a demand from a higher-up for the sake of making the film more profitable. This is not the case with Coonskin. Nothing was holding Ralph back from what he wanted to call out. and place this tone that reflects upon a dark reality that most people choose to ignore. In fact, to let you know how this movie is harsh, here's how it begins.
You.
Seriously, how many movies do you know start off with a random character looking straight at you and say, "F you"? It's absolutely rude, yet this is probably the greatest opening line in cinema history. So with Bakshi letting it all out here, what is the big thing that he wanted to comment? Well, a lot of things, but his biggest topic for his satire is how America treats black people. The way that the country throws them to the bottom of their own system, resulting in them struggling to live in the poorest of living conditions. And with how they've been so disregarded in our society, the ones that have to live in the projects are often subjected to have their community be corrupted by crooks and criminals. Rather it be underground organizations that control the city with their connections, cops who use their power to place themselves above the law, or con men who exploit people's political and civil rights movements for their own personal gain.
Don't mind.
Don't
I'm
be
nervous.
Don't be nervous. There's no reason to be nervous.
I'm not nervous about
They're
the
ready for you out there.
I know, man. It's the money they got. That's why I'm nervous.
There ain't lots of money.
I ain't nervous about the
They've been
act.
lining up since 4:50.
But I ain't nervous about the act.
No. Oh, no. The act is great.
The act is good.
We got the
You got the
girls.
photographs.
We got the photos. They're ready. They're on the skylight already.
If there's one connection between most of these scenes, it's to present the message of how black people are treated, and doing so in a way that is both direct and artistic so that Ralph calls out the mafia, cops, bad faith actors, and especially America itself. And that's what makes this film so engaging. It's not to see the brothers take down Harlem's bad bosses, but to see them take down the system that the country built for black people. The story itself may not be very well built, but it's the powerful message that Bakshi wanted to say and its unapologetic tone that makes this so fascinating to watch as it calls out the hard truth about America's racism problem. The animation. In a way, this is more of a mixed media type of picture instead of a straightforward animated film. On top of the cartoon characters roaming around the streets of Harlem, the film also integrates still images of the real neighborhood in live-action footage, whether it be entire scenes on their own or live actors mingling with the tunes. In that regard, it is fair to say that Coonskin is the Ralph Bakshi version of Song of the South, except the Disney-fied tone which partly caused the film to be so taboo is replaced with a blaxploitation theme. One thing to note about Bakshi's movies, especially his early ones, is that he tends to work with a small budget, which in this case is $1.6 million. Certainly bigger than his other works, but even back then, that's still a fraction compared to other animated films at the time, giving the movie a combination of benefits and setbacks. On one hand, this contains some of the best animation of Bakshi's early years. There are several times where it shows that Ralph let his animators go all out with moments that are both smooth and dynamic in order to either highlight a character's personality, like during Savior's performance,
Black is tough. Black is together. Black is sweet. Black is sharp.
or let the scene get lost in its surrealism, like during Manigan's hallucination. I can't deny that there were some good animators who worked on this. And yet, it's worth noting that the time to produce the animation was relatively short for an animated film, and some of that rushed aspects, along with the smaller budget, do show in the picture. It's already an obvious tell with the use of photographs and live footage instead of the usual hand-painted backgrounds, but as good as the animation itself can be, I also find that it can be quite inconsistent. As much as it may try to look like one unified picture, it didn't hide that some scenes were made by different animators with their own different style and come from different backgrounds. Some look like they were from veterans who worked on features and cartoons, while others look like they were done by young artists fresh off of a Saturday morning series job. Not to mention how the designs were given a questionable approach and may not leave a good introduction to viewers, which I'll talk about more later.
What you doing spreading the news looking like that? I don't want to be conspicuous.
In a way, despite some impressive scenes, these problems make the film look, in a lack of a better term, cheap. And on top of being cheap, the animation is crudely cobbled together, it's unattractive to look at, and it's the perfect style for this movie. Think about it. This is a feature about the poor living conditions that many black people have to endure. In that sense, why not have the movie stylistically present that throughout? Yes, the movie looks and is cheap, but so is everyone else in the picture. So they have to do what they can to build this together and take those necessary shortcuts. Kind of like the movie itself is built upon the location that the movie is set in. As a result, it oddly makes the film feel immersive, transporting audiences into the dark corners of Harlem to give that uncomfortable sense that you're in a poor and kind of dangerous area. Even the use of pictures and live footage is a benefit to give this sense of realism and add to the message of how what we are seeing is not something that's happening in some cartoon fantasy, but in our own real world, and that the problems in there are also the problems happening here. Maybe you have noticed something that might have made you uncomfortable. And I wouldn't be surprised if some may ask, if this is supposed to be against racism, then why do most of the characters wear blackface? Yes, this first impression is what made the film so controversial on its initial release. The kind that reportedly led to protests at Paramount Pictures to stop distributing the film, and those same people even went as far as throwing smoke bombs in the theater showing the movie to have people stop watching it. And even during all that chaos, Ralph was getting support from Republicans because they thought this was some sort of pro-racist film. And before anyone gets triggered, don't hate me for saying it, hate the facts that's in the documented history of how Republicans and Confederates try to normalize racism. Oh wait, they already do. But while Bakshi and his animators do use a lot of stereotypical imagery, they actually serve a purpose. They're meant to portray how America sees those people. The country doesn't just treat them badly, but also looks down upon them as the dumb caricatures that it thinks they are. Of course, they're now viewed as hateful, discriminative, and ugly, but the film uses that to its advantage and throws that back to its viewers right in the face as if to say, this is what America thinks black people are, and this is how it treats them. Welcome to systemic racism.
Hey, put down your gun. You won. You can take me. Come on, fella.
Oh, she got to clap.
I'll even add that the live-action footage does serve as a nice contrast from the stereotypes, working as an aid to show how real black people are nothing like those gross caricatures. On the surface, this is an ugly-looking movie. It looks cheap, the designs are offensively appalling, and there were way too many corners cut just to have this movie done. However, it is not the quality itself that is admirable, it's how it uses its animation to further deliver its message, and how it pushes itself over the edge that no other cartoon would ever do that is absolutely genius. The characters. Much like the story, the characters aren't meant to be traditional characters to learn more about them so that it could enhance the journey. I'll even say now that my one criticism with them is that they are pretty flat and don't provide much development for themselves. However, their actual purpose is to be a piece of the puzzle for the movie's big message, a caricature of their archetype meant to be the personification of part of the problem with America's racism. And while I may find a few flaws with them as characters, I will add that they do make up for it with some great acting. They all do a tremendous job playing their roles, where they can be a bit over the top in order to sell their personalities more, like Preacher Fox, played by Charles Gordon.
I don't lie to you or God. I still take care of Rabbit and Bear, you know. And I don't want you or Mama to worry none, cause old Fox here, he done gone.
Stop it, Fox, stop it.
I'm gonna be putting you back now, Ben.
Or they can feel very genuine and naturally fit in their roles, like Brother Bear, played by Barry White.
Sure, whites. You hear that any whites? Yeah, any whites.
But my personal standout role in this picture is easily Philip Michael Thomas as Brother Rabbit, perfectly capturing his sharp wit and cunning menace to those who dare fight him, while also keeping an affection for those he cares about like his brothers.
Look, I sees how them guns is mighty nice, but I'd hate to let the congregation think that the boys was being frugal by not buying more.
Yeah.
Now, ain't that the truth, brothers and sisters? Ain't that the truth, brothers and sisters?
But speaking of the brothers, first there's Brother Rabbit, the unofficial leader of the trio who can easily sniff out the bullshit that's corrupting Harlem. Technically the typical protagonist who goes out to set things right, his admirable trait is how he takes out his enemies with his intelligence. Sure, he resorts to violence when necessary, but the way he rose to the top is with his quick intellect, where he throws at them those Uncle Remus tricks.
Hey! Hi there! What's the matter with you? You're not hard of hearing. Look, if you don't say hello by the time I count 2, I'm gonna bust you. 1, 2. Hello?
Next to him is Preacher Fox, the highly eccentric, God-fearing preacher who helps Rabbit in his own way, and Brother Bear, the brawn of the family who is the most keen to settle and live a humble life, yet doesn't want to leave his brothers behind when they need him. In terms of who the Rabbit is up against, first there's Savior, a con man who swindles the people of Harlem off of their money by exploiting their fight for civil rights, which in this case is the promise of killing white people. He represents the bad faith actors and movements who only emphasize to take down the enemy and say that the best solution for that is to pay them. It's an interesting topic to bring up, since even to this day, we still see this happen in all kinds of social movements. Not just the well-intended ones, but especially in right-wing culture war types where all they do is throw hate towards anything they label as globalists, SJWs, or woke. Seriously, they barely even hide that they never have their viewers' best intentions or even believe in half of what they say. Why enable their platform when they rarely do anything for their own cause? Next, there's Mannigan, a bigoted police officer who uses his position to gain power over Harlem. Morally bankrupt and no regard for the law, he represents what is nicely considered as the bad seeds of the police force. The ones who don't view bigotry as a crime and are driven by their own prejudice and personal gain to distribute discipline to whoever they see fit. A lot like the cops that help domestic terrorist groups like the Proud Boys or the ones who murdered George Floyd and Tyree Nichols. And finally, there's the group that Bakshi hates the most, the Mafia. Which is ironic considering that the producer is the same guy who did The Godfather, who are interpreted like sewer rats running a circus, surrounded by freaks and clowns who only care about power and would not hesitate to kill one of their own to maintain it. And alongside this grotesque Italian goblin is his sons, who are...
If anyone tries to shoot Papa, bang, bang, I'll blow his eyes out.
Yeah, probably screw him later.
You know me.
Okay, so maybe not everything aged well, and the movie was nasty to the Godfather's sons. Unlike the black people whose stereotypical portray is meant to counter racism, the sons only feel like gay stereotypes that unfortunately found themselves in the crossfires of Ralph's rage against the Mafia. I get what he wants to say on that front, But now it feels like there's a hint of hypocrisy that while slamming bigotry towards black people, the feature also paints a terrible picture of drags and trans folk. Guess you can't expect everything to hold up from something that came out of the 70s.
If I tell Papa what you were doing, he'd break both your arms and legs.
But then there's the fourth villain. Not one of Rabbit's targets, but definitely the most powerful force of them all, Miss America, the movie's personification of the United States. As the movie presents black people as the way the country sees them, she, in contrast, is portrayed as a goddess, a beautiful blonde and very busty woman that any person would lust for. However, she is also a cold-hearted bitch, as she uses her appeal to lure black men in, and then when they have their guard down, that's when she'll either beat them up or straight up kill them to get pleasure out of their misery. If you need a clear visual metaphor of the country's racism, then Miss America is your gal.
Help! Rape! Rape!
On a side note, there are some people who only appear in one scene to emphasize the poor living conditions in the projects. While they serve little purpose to the plot, they do highlight the message by providing examples of how tragic their lives are as they're stuck in the bottom of the system.
That's okay, I got light deep. I make sure I don't see them no more. When I walk past them, I keep my eyes to the ground. I ain't seen a white for 100 years, and they ain't seen me.
In a way, each character holds a unique message to address the problems with the United States, and what makes them memorable is not through their arc, but from what they symbolize and how they bring to life what they represent. Out of all of his films, Ralph Bakshi himself considers Coonskin to be his greatest work. And I couldn't agree more. Coonskin is a powerful animated feature unlike any other that is not afraid to call out systemic racism and the problems of America in a direct and impactful way. While I wouldn't call this a perfect movie, since the way it's built in the traditional sense is a bit messy, and there are a few elements that have aged horribly, but what it did right is better than almost any other animated film out there thanks to its bravery. The way that it's not afraid to get into tough subject matter, use provocative imagery, and criticize America as a way to artistically combat racism. This is not a movie that many people want to see, but I know that this is a movie that people need to see. Not everything will be easy to stomach, but with the unfortunate condition that we are currently in where racism and bigotry is still thriving, the movie's message needs to be heard. Also, at the risk of sounding like Savior, I just want to quickly ask if you can like and subscribe if you haven't yet. This was one of my biggest reviews I've done, and I'll appreciate any little action you can express to say that you've enjoyed your time. This is one of those movies I can confidently say that it's one of a kind. You won't find any other animated film that would go to the dangerous lengths that Coonskin did. And that's why I'm giving this the Animat Seal of Approval. And you know what's funny? Ralph Bakshi made a better and more memorable Song of the South than Disney. Now that's something I'll be bringing to my laughing place. Hey guys, this is Animat, and I'm not gonna lie, I feel like not only is this one of my biggest reviews that I've done in years, but this is probably one of the best that I've done, seriously. I feel very proud of the work that I put in with this one. And also, one more thing that I would like to comment about Coonskin. As you could tell, I love the movie so much, but at the same time, you may notice behind me that I love collecting animation cells. Or rather, I love collecting animation cells when I can afford them. But one that I've always wanted to have, like, among my, like, most wanted production cells to actually own, is actually one of Coonskin. But more specifically, I want to have one where it prominently features Brother Rabbit, Preacher Fox, and Brother Bear. Now, I know that Ralph Bakshi production cells, they can sell like hotcakes, and they can go for a pretty big price. But still, I would love to have a Coonskin production cell and hang it up on my wall. Again, I love this movie, and it's just one that I've always dreamed of actually owning, you know, kind of like among my top prized possessions that I would love to have one day. But anyways, now that the review is over, now that we are officially done with Coonskin, it is now time that we shall go and move on to a Patreon request. And this time around, we are going to have a request coming from KSCG Guy. So, if you would all like to be like KSCG Guy and you want to go and support my work and you want to get some amazing rewards at the same time, including, but not limited to, watching my videos before anyone else, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. But at the same time, if you would like to suggest an animated film you would like me to review and I would put onto the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. So, with that said, what is it that KSCG Guy asked me to go and review? Well, the good news is, for those who find that maybe this review got a little too heavy in terms of the subject matter, the next animated film I'll be looking at will be a lot more family friendly. In fact, this is actually one that is a part of a major franchise. But don't worry though, I'm not going to be looking at the hundreds of sequels that it has created. I'm going to be looking at the first one. Yes, the first movie that started it all.
You.